right.
Thank you. I'd like to
You are
call,
live.
thank you, Keely. I'd like to call to order the November 4th, 2020 regular meeting of the Keel Island Planning Commission via video conferencing. Petra, could you call the roll?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Daddy,
Here.
Mr. Capelli,
Here.
Mr. Iwan, Mr. Moffett,
Here.
Ms. Messerman,
Here.
Mr. Simpson.
Here.
Thank you, Petra. The first item on our agenda, or the third item actually, is the approval of minutes from our October 7th, 2020 meeting. Could I have a motion regarding this?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any changes, corrections, additions to these minutes as submitted?
I have none.
Okay. I had none either. Well, but I did before they went out to you, so it's all done. Hearing no changes or amendments, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you. We have no old business this month. Under new business, we have two final subdivision plats, both at Ocean Park under tabs 2 and 3. John, if you want to walk us through them one at a time.
I'll certainly be glad to do so.
Thank
Let me know when you're able to see my screen there.
Got it. Got it. Yes.
Awesome. So the first application before you today is final plat for a phase in Ocean Park known as 8A. This is a portion of it, specifically lots 227 through 235. It's at the eastern end of the island. As you know it, the preliminary subdivision plat came before you in October. And this is the area here. It's zoned R2, right adjacent to High Dunes and Helena Court. There's an area that depicts the subject property. And particularly it's these first 6 lots, or 5 lots rather, at the beginning of High Dunes here, as you see it on the screen. I imagine the remaining of this will be coming at a later date. But these first 5 lots are what are before you right now. Additionally, if you recall that they're doing preliminary plat, that there was also an area that would be conveyed to the community association that sits adjacent to the right of way. And so the total acreage is about 4.3 acres, 4.4 acres. And the residual will be about 2.6 acres.
If I remember correctly, John, from last month, the actual conveyance to Kika is right of way, so that the right of way adjoins the lots. So there's no need for an easement. At least
Correct.
That's the way I remember it from Ray's comments.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be a naming of the right of way. It would just essentially become part of the right of way, so that access is granted directly adjacent to those new lots.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about this application?
Does Kika have anything to say about that conveyance, or they're fine with it?
No, we received a letter of them accepting it. I don't have the date on that, or I didn't include that in your materials, but they've acknowledged that particular area.
Okay.
For conveyance.
Any other questions or concerns? Could we have a motion to approve this final plat of Phase 8A?
I'll move to approve the plat.
Thanks, Gail. And a second?
I second.
Thanks, Gail, for the second. Any other comments before we vote on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, John, we'll do 5A now.
So the second application before you, 5A, this is also a final plat that's coming before you for 6 lots adjacent off of Front 9 Lane. This is known in common name as Phase 5A of Ocean Park. It is also zoned R2. If you recall, for the preliminary plat, the first of many lots that will be developed off of Front 9 Lane, which is adjacent to Victory Bay Lane within Ocean Park. Here's an aerial that depicts the location of the subject property. The plats, the lots that are being created, recall that there is both a common area and as well as several shared access easements, particularly at the first at 545, and then there's one at 561 or 551 and 559. 561 and 559. And there's also a shared access easement at 555. These 6 lots here are the first phase of 5A, and the residual, as in the previous plat, I would anticipate as those are presented for approval, that those will come at a later date for your review. If there, I've kind of called out the non-residential piece that's a sort of a common area with the shared driveway access easements, and is also included as a drainage easement there, totaling about 10.5 acres for these particular lots. These have met the requirements for final approval. And if you have questions, I can maybe entertain those.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the lot, on the 2 lots that look like there's a little square in the back of them that's not part of the lot that says future development. Is that still land that the developer can do something with?
So that's essentially part of the residual. It would be zoned R2.
How would you gain access to that?
The access would be still from Front 9 Lane, but that track, if you look, it extends all the way through. So it's just connected by the marsh. It isn't an individual parcel there. That entire future development parcel is the residual that's connected to there. So
it's not. It wouldn't be developed. There wouldn't be a house built on that.
Correct. And Ray, you probably can chime in. I doubt that there would be a house built there because you have 2 lots to the north of that marsh area. It may be just a common area for.
Yeah, and I guess future development could be substituted for park. We simply were indicating there'd be some additional activity such as some landscape improvement, but certainly not residential.
Okay.
Ray, does that mean there's no room for a access to that property through the shared driveway between 561 and 559?
Well, that's correct. Whatever landscape improvement, it's sort of intended to be, for pedestrian or bike access for those 3 lots that sort of form a horseshoe, or the 3 homes would kind of form a horseshoe, and you'd have this kind of common green space that each of the owners could access, but not intended to be accessed by vehicles.
And then who would bear the responsibility of maintaining that property?
Well, just like that other little out parcel, that'll all be part of an HOA set up for this community.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm just curious, Ray. I mean, why create parcel like that behind lot 563 or 557? Why not just have that be part of the lots? I'm just curious what you're
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, part of it deals with the 3 different lot sizes that are allowed in R2. And you may know that there's a sliding scale of impervious cover setbacks. So the larger the lots, the larger the setbacks, the less amount of impervious cover.
Okay.
So expanding them could affect the site geometry of how we've laid out the homes to fit within those lots.
I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Are there any other comments or questions about this submittal? Hearing none, all those in favor of the final subdivision plat, Ocean Park Phase 5A, 6 lots, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. John, why don't you cover correspondence and staff comments for us?
Sure. I just a few moments before our meeting, I sent out a copy of what I'm going to just kind of briefly go through. Just to keep you updated on a few things on the island as far as projects and planning and zoning. The first, you may be aware the Parkway Improvement Project has entered phase 2, focusing on landscape improvements along the Parkway. Parcel 13, a number of actions pertaining to Lot 1, and I'll allow Mr. Prickett to kind of walk through that as that was on the council's agenda yesterday. I shared this update with you last meeting that East West Partners, we've re-engaged with them. They are building and planning have re-engaged with their design team. And so we've been going back and forth on the development of that particular beachfront project, which we anticipate that they'll officially submit sometime in January for building review. Also, interestingly, at yesterday's town council meeting, I encourage you to go back and review if you weren't tuned into that meeting yesterday. Lee Bundrick with the Conservancy presented on 2 studies that were underway. And I'll leave it at there if Mr. Prickett want to expound on any of that. But those 2 studies were part of what the town funded. And so those are really exciting projects that will really have some impact, I think, for particularly from a planning standpoint, once we get a little bit ahead and attaining some of that data from that study. The other, Johns Island and regional planning, particularly around transportation. As you know, segment C of the main road corridor that's been open for public comment. So residents are encouraged to make those comments to those alternatives. Just a few stats there on, or numbers rather, on permit review. It's still steady as far as building and zoning permits still being received. And a number of subdivision plats, particularly for lot combinations, that kind of thing has been submitted. And the final thing, I think I noted already, but just in tune, the FEMA flood maps, which will be going into effect in January. We're having some conversations around what that looks like internally. It's created some conversation between Architecture Review Board, the town, and local firms that has had some impact. So we're discussing that internally. That may come with some future changes or thoughts of how we approach interpret or the effects rather of those new maps. A lot of the areas, as you may be aware, are different from previous to 2004 maps. And the 2 other notes that I have, I just wanted to say on behalf of planning staff, thank you, Mr. Moffitt, as this will probably be his last meeting with the Planning Commission. And then the final note is, of course, our continuing ed. I've sent that information out to you. So if you take a look at that, there's a couple this week and then a few others later in November. Patria has just reminded me that those presentations are available for Lee and from Lee online, so you can go back and look at those. That's all, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you very much, John. Mr. Prickett, could we have our council liaison comments, please?
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, John. First of all, I should add on to John's comments about John Moffett, who is running unopposed for the four-year term at City Council. And so we wish him well. If he will vote and one other of you may vote for him, he may get elected to that position.
I'm hoping my wife votes for me.
Well, you're going to have to talk to her about that. I can't influence her, but we look forward to your participation, and thank you, Fred, for freeing him up from this duty. Let me, as John alluded to, Mark Permar made a presentation to council yesterday regarding the third amendment to the development agreement. This, as we talked last month, is very similar to what the request was relative to the other part of parcel 13. This one relates to lot 1, but as you'll recall, the East-West partners wanted a increase in the number of dwelling units per building for a limited number of buildings in order to create fewer buildings and a better development. This was a similar request for what is just lot 1 of 13B. And that was granted. So it'll be a slight increase in the number of units in a couple of buildings, but lower building heights for the units that are located closest to what is the community pool there. They did, Mark's met with all of the community leadership there and the various entities that surround it, and answered all of their questions. I'm sure they have a keen interest, but at this point they seem comfortable with the way development is going in that area. So anyway, that was passed by council. I should also mention, and a couple of you, and especially Andy and others, know about this already, but the town received a clean audit from its auditors with not only a clean opinion, but no comments at all. So my thank you to the audit committee of the board, as well as the Malden and Jenkins, who's the firm that does the audit. So that's good for the town, given our background and our history in that area sometimes. I will mention what John Taylor also mentioned. There was a presentation of 2 things being done by the Kiva Conservancy that are very important to us in the long run, that are being funded by the town. One was the groundwater table. As you know, they're drilling wells throughout the island. They've drilled 15 and they've just added 6 more that now over time will measure the level of the groundwater. Because, you know, if we lose our groundwater, we lose our vegetation. And they're seeing some interesting trends already. We'll know a lot more over a number of years, but as the seasons go by and we get rain and we get tidal movement, you see the groundwater moving up and down, and it's very interesting how it moves around. So we're going to learn a lot from that. And the other study they're doing is the marsh vulnerability study. We're using principally aerial photography. They're able to trace, and we've got some history already, what the marshes are doing and where we're seeing land accrete and where we're losing land along tidal basins and so on. That will be helpful us in studying areas that become vulnerable and potentially beginning to protect them, as opposed to let them just over the course of 30 years wash away. So 2 good studies going on. Those are just beginning. There will be a lot more data, but they were able to capture in the study about the marshlands some historic photography. So we're actually able to go back some 20 years and see where it was 20 years ago and where the movement is today and whether we've gained land or lost land and so on. So it's pretty useful. Anyway, those are the highlights of what went on that related to the planning side, Fred, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Hey, Dan, one question on the development agreement.
Yeah.
I know John has mentioned it, but I didn't hear any discussion yesterday about the type of units that were going into the 10 buildings, i.e. individual condos, rentals, I hope not shared ownership, but did you guys talk about that at all in a workshop, or did Ray
No.
mention it?
We didn't. My understanding, and Ray, you may want to correct me on this if I'm wrong, is the general direction is not what I'll call timeshares or partial ownership structures, but single, fee simple condominium units. Is that correct, John?
Yes,
Yeah.
that from our understanding as well, those will be similar to other models, not what you see in the Lonesome of Timbers.
Right. It's not that they couldn't be rented, Andy, but they would be purchased and owned by a particular owner.
It'd be like a short-term rental if they were rented.
They could do that if they chose to. Yeah, not unlike Tennis Club Villa or any of the other condominium
Right,
complexes.
exactly. As
Yeah.
opposed to having 12 owners or whatever on the deed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions or comments for Dan? Great.
Well, yeah, there is one other, Dan. Did you tell John that he's going to get paid?
I didn't tell him that, but there's another vote that has to take place.
Yeah, it has to have that
Yeah, I
second
know.
reading.
I noticed in your presentation yesterday, you said everybody who was elected and appointed. Now, I think this planning commission's appointed or
Well-
re-elected by somebody.
The appointment related to the role of the judge. That was the reason for that comment, Andy. But I'm sure there is plenty of room in the town budget to pay all of its committees $1,000 an hour at least. Now, we did feel yesterday, for those of you who didn't participate, we are considering, and we passed for the first time, a small stipend to council members and the municipal court judge, as well as the mayor. And for council members, it would be $1,000 a quarter or $4,000 for the year, which they may opt not to collect if they choose to. And the similar amount for the judge as well as for the mayor, but it would be twice that. So $8,000 a year or $2,000 a quarter for the mayor. Simply to acknowledge the effort that has to go into doing a good job in those roles. It does, as you can imagine, for the mayor, take a lot of time. You have a lot of legal and other responsibilities. The mayor, under our form of government, as I mentioned yesterday, is not only a member of the legislative body, the council, but he or she is the chief executive officer of the town. They are literally responsible for the health and safety of everybody that is on the island or in the town, including those people who are guests at the hotel. So it's a big job, and we just felt they ought to get some degree of acknowledgement. So if it's paid at the end of the quarter, so if John Moffett does a good job for the quarter, then he gets paid. If not, you never know.
So Dan, does that have to be approved before the election?
It does have to be approved before the election. So the second reading will happen. I think we're scheduled for the day of the election. We may have to move that up a day in order to do it before the election or before the election's over. Yeah, it's a funny situation, Fred. As you know, the 5 people who were on council yesterday who voted for this, actually, none of those people are assured of a position next year. 2 of them aren't running at all, and 3 of them are in contested votes. And the judge has announced his retirement. So it was about the only time you could fit it all in and have a proposal like this gain any weight. So anyway, that's where we are at the moment.
Okay, great.
We'll hear more from the public between now and next reading, I'm sure. We'll see.
Great, Dan. Thank you. I guess there are no public comments. Commissioner comments, Mr. Dowdy.
I have none.
Okay, how about you, Gail?
I have none.
Mr. Capelli?
I have 2 questions for John, actually. John, in the report, you mentioned the the Main Road study and segment C, and then encourage the comments. There was a mention yesterday at the meeting that the town is in possession of the hard copy of the materials that went out from the county on these projects or on this project. And frankly, if you look online to get it, I can't make out anything from what you see online. Are those
I can-
hard copies available for
Copy
review?
of that.
Can we come in and look at those at the,
I can send you a PDF of it if you like a PDF, or if you want us to print you a hard copy, we can do that.
I don't think that helps. I tried to print it off what was on the website, and you can't make out exactly where the roads are and where the new portions are going, or if they're going. I mean, I don't know if it's any clearer in the one that you have, but it would seem to be, if it's available, it'd be a lot easier just to walk in and look at it.
Andy,
Yes.
I have a hard copy at my home. Well, I'd be happy to lend to you. It's pretty easy to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only other comment on that-
Share that we can get you a hard copy. We can send those over to you, a hard copy, which I think it is a little bit better to read. I don't have full size of those, but I think at least a hard copy will at least be able to see them. If for some reason they aren't as easy to read, hard copy, what we can do is I can sit down with you and blow them up on one of the monitors here, and we can walk through if you have any questions that way.
Well, John, I might save you a trip and just come down and at the same time, look at the flood map, which you can't read online either. So if I could look at that and maybe take a hard copy with me of the segment C proposal, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Bill, Fred, John, any of the rest of you, Gail, I do have one hard copy here, which I'm happy to lend out. It's worth looking at and studying. And they want our comments by November, I think, 16th, right, John?
Yes.
12th,
16th is that
12th.
date. If you would like a copy, just raise your hand and we can have patrons send you or have a copy ready for you. Mr. Capelli. Any others? Okay, we'll just get one for everyone.
Hey, Dan, is the comment yesterday about joining the Johns Island group, is Legree and all the old timers still part of that?
You know, I don't know. The mayor's been involved in those conversations and I have not been. So, John,
I can share it. So the Johns Island Task Force has been a group that has now taken a position to bring in a lot of those different smaller entities that have for a long time shared that they've represented Johns Island interests. But this task force now has been sort of transformed in its makeup to really include, I think, a good vast majority of all the thought leaders across the way. So it includes representation both from Kiowa, Seabrook, local small business owners, large tract land owners, as well as planning staff and professionals from both city and council. The interesting part of that as well is that both planning and city staff members attend those monthly meetings. Council representation from the city council attends those meetings. Transportation staff members. So this is really have become, in my opinion, I think a great advantage for Johns Island and the area, because for the first time they've been able to get a sounding board of folks to get on the same page. I mean, it's not perfect. You have small interests and different interests, but majority of them march to the same drum because they've been able to talk and coordinate. So there's actually a meeting going on right now for that task force. But yeah, it isn't the old just sort of one small group, I think, that you may be alluding to.
But it's still a lot of the same membership as far as I remember. hearing about. But anyway, it already started. There was a letter in the Post and Courier today from somebody basically deciding it was option A or whatever the option number was, A or whatever, was the way to go. That's widening Bohicket and ignoring option 3 for the new lane. So, I mean, that group was always negative to any proposal for a greenway or a new road. And
So
also
that's different leadership. It's a different, that group was essentially a different, as a smaller group. The task force now, I think it's a much larger dynamic that from a community and public engagement standpoint, I think they have been doing their best to really reach out to all of the stakeholders to really try to do some consensus building. And the mayor had just met with the chairman this past Monday. We sat down and talked about this. So those are some of the, I think, positives from this Johns Island task force. The most recent, I guess, development from that group is that they have now seen that it's best to leverage the amount of voices together. So the other group, the Johns Island Community Association, that's a newer group that's kind of more so a collective of all of the HOAs for a lot of the newer subdivisions on Johns Island. That group together has formed the Johns Island Community Association, and so they partner with the task force as well as another group to kind of sit down together and kind of figure out what's best to attack specifically for transportation in the area for Johns Island.
So you're saying Legree is not a member?
Mr. Legree's group, he doesn't attend the regular meetings. I mean, there may be someone from that group but he's not a part of the task force. The current chairman, John Zoglar, is the current chairman of that, but Mr. Legree does not regularly attend those. I mean, he may have others from his camp do, but that's primarily, I think, they focus on the general the general invitation for most of all stakeholders in Johns Island, including Key
So
West.
they haven't, as a group, they haven't developed a position on the alternatives?
That may be discussed today, but as I know it today, there hasn't been a consensus on one alternative or the other. From my recent guest or understanding, which those conversations are still being had. They're wanting a little bit more metrics to really determine the best efficiency as far as whether it's a transportation, meaning that it is the new alternative for widening Bohicket versus the new road versus river. Which one of those alternatives really provides the most relief from a traffic standpoint? Which one of those is most sensitive to the existing residential and commercial nature of Johns Island, rural? It's a lot of cultural impacts, a lot of environmental impacts. And so those sensitivities, I think, are being weighed in together with all of those alternatives. And there just hasn't been, I think, enough data for them, or at least publicly, to acknowledge a particular alternative as a collective.
Yeah. That being said, Andy, to your point, I think it doesn't hurt all of us as individual residents of Kiowa to write. They're looking for comments, to write in and comment on the alternatives we think make sense.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dan.
Wouldn't
In
hurt.
fact, I've already started, but I'm stuck because of the inability to see where it's all going. But
Well,
I'll come in and look at that hard copy.
Good.
John, any further word on what's going on with the retirement development? Retirement
No
facility?
update from that development. As I know it now, that they're going through a lot of internal struggles, or not struggles rather, but just testing and exercises. So we have not heard anything on the senior living.
It
The
looks
only
like from
commercial
the,
projects that we've
Yeah,
been in with are the resort, as it pertains to the cottages, which are coming underway pretty quickly. And we've re-engaged, not necessarily in a hotel, but Night Heron Park in some early discussions of what that may look like. They're wanting to do some work at Night Heron Park. So we've engaged in some conversations there. Those are only commercial projects outside of what's happening on the beachfront.
Given the full-page ad in the Leisure magazine that they put out, or Legends, the retirement facility has a phone number, but it looks like from the information on the website, they have changed direction, if you will. They now have a management company coming in to manage the property. There may be a similar company running or owning the property and building the development, but it looks like they bring in a third party for management, and they don't answer much in a way of information. So I would suspect that they've gone through a whole lot of things and probably may even come back with a whole new idea. Who knows?
Okay. Thanks, Andy. To John Moffett, thanks for your service on the Planning Commission, and I am sure you will be a good addition to the Town Council for a 4-year term, which is very nice of you to do.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And Fred, I certainly appreciate your appointing me back a couple years ago, and it's been a good experience for me. So I've enjoyed it. On to the next challenge.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck, John, even if we can't vote for you.
So I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Moved.
And a second. Thanks, Bill. All those in favor say aye.
Bye.
Aye.